Godzilla. Yeah, about that whole mess. Stay tuned for 2024, I promise. Good morning, my beautiful people. My name is All Night, and welcome to a new series that I would like to call Mornings at the Movies. A series where I watch a movie and then wait until the honeymoon phase is over the next morning and give you my unfiltered thoughts as I just woke up and am enjoying a delicious cup of coffee. I don't know if I'm really breaking down barriers or anything with this concept. I just thought it'd be an interesting take on my ability to finally start talking about movies on this channel. Because as much of a gamer I am at heart, I also love cinema. I feel like I don't get a chance to talk enough about movies on this channel, so after the movie that I just watched, I desperately needed to talk about it. So not only after just coming out of the theater to see Godzilla Minus One yesterday, but peak cinema also dropped yesterday. Don't worry, we will talk about that in due time. But for now, my name is All Night, and welcome to my review of Godzilla Minus One. Let's take it away. Godzilla Minus One is fresh in everyone's minds right now. Directed by Takashi Yamazaki, this film is a period piece for the Godzilla franchise. Most other films in the Godzilla franchise have usually taken place in modern day when the film came out. This film rewinds the clock back to the closing years from World War II after 1945, and follows an ex-kamikaze pilot by the name of Shikishima as he deals with the aftermath and guilt of having survived the war and his new war that is just beginning with Godzilla. And that is as far into the plot as I want to get for this movie, because I cannot emphasize enough how there are moments in this movie that need to be experienced for the first time and need to be experienced in a theater. I want to elaborate a little bit more because coming out of that movie yesterday, and this is why I'm glad I've kind of, taken some time to really marinate on it, because coming out of the theater, I was starstruck. I had those rose-tinted glasses on. I was like, this is the greatest Godzilla movie ever made. Just flat out. Shin Godzilla, get it out of here. 1954, get it out of here. Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, giant monsters all out attack, get it out of here. Look, only true Godzilla fans know that Godzilla Final Wars is and will remain the greatest Godzilla movie of all time. No one will ever top it. No, but genuinely, when you break it down to Godzilla Minus One's plot from beginning to end, it's a self-contained story, follows a small group of characters, and there's no other monsters for Godzilla to fight this time around. Godzilla is a new entity in this world. He starts the film actually insanely small, almost like maybe only twice as large as the T-Rex was in Jurassic Park. But by the end of the movie, you do see Godzilla actually being larger, but still not the largest iteration that we have ever seen of the King of the Monsters. Following Shikishima through this story is a multi-year journey with him and his newly found family that now he has to protect in the wake of this new giant monster attack. And one of the coolest things that I think is vastly underrated in the Godzilla franchise is any time where humans are trying to figure out how to kill Godzilla. For those of you that don't care about spoilers for Shin Godzilla specifically, but I found it very interesting in that movie that, despite there being a lot of scenes with the humans, when they were figuring out how to kill something that cannot be killed by conventional weaponry, and they zeroed in on dumping concrete down his throat, I thought that was so cool. Ordinarily, in, I want to say 90% of Godzilla's movies, you're normally rooting for him as the hero. And when you go to a Godzilla movie, you are going to go and see your favorite giant lizard wreck Tokyo or whatever other city he finds himself in. And you get plenty of that in this movie too. But the thing that I need to emphasize for everyone watching at home that was on the fence about Godzilla Minus One is that this movie finally figured out a proper balance between human characters and the Godzilla kaiju characters. I want to say that, there was never a part in the movie where I genuinely felt bored. There was a part in Act 2 where you went a good bit without seeing Godzilla, but the difference between this movie and maybe a movie like Godzilla 2014 was that this movie made you so invested in the human character stories. Kamiki Ryunosuke is the one who plays Shikishima in this movie, and his performance in this movie cannot be understated. That man put his whole ass into making you feel this turmoil that this ex-World War II soldier was feeling. Also, full stop, going into the movie, it's kind of a bummer. It's not the happiest movie on the planet Earth. You're not going in to see Wedding Crashers or, Get Smart. You're going in to a Godzilla movie that is a period piece, that is also a disaster movie that deals with the themes of trauma and war. When you boil down a giant monster movie to its core, it turns itself into a natural disaster movie, but it slides its way into being an unnatural disaster. And that's how you feel in this movie, especially with how Godzilla is portrayed. I cannot emphasize enough how this is the first version of Godzilla that made my heart rate go up. There were so many good, tense scenes with Godzilla, especially the first scene of him in the ocean. I don't want to spoil that scene, but all I have to say about how I felt during that entire sequence, go play Shadow of the Colossus and get yourself to the 10th Colossus, the sandworm sand snake Colossus. You'll know exactly what I mean. The sense of scale that is felt with this Godzilla and the just sheer animosity and the sheer bias against humanity that you feel. Rather, it's not even bias. This Godzilla's not even really motivated by anything. We know that he is a prehistoric creature, and we know that he was mutated by atomic bomb testing. And that's it. That's all you get. The legendary MonsterVerse Godzilla, you can kind of get a sense of his personality and know that he has a grudge against humanity because of what humanity has done to him and his race for years. Shin Godzilla was a wild animal who was just scared because it was this crazy mutated thing that had never existed before and was just trying to go places, but we kept trying to destroy it and interfere with what it was trying to do, so it obviously just lashed out. Godzilla Minus One has a vendetta against humanity that you have no idea why. But the one theme that you'll always catch with a lot of Godzilla movies is that they will refer to Godzilla as a force of nature, something that is naturally occurring that is there to keep humanity in check. So when you think of something like a tornado or an earthquake or a tsunami, Mother Nature doesn't have a vendetta against humanity. The forces of nature aren't malicious and aren't lashing out against humanity. It's just things that happen that just so happen to coincide with human existence that directly affects us in really negative ways. And Godzilla is exactly that in this movie. Admittedly, yes, he's just kind of showing up and wrecking shit and then leaving, but how unnatural and natural they made Godzilla feel in this movie is something that no other Godzilla movie has done for me at this point. I want to take a brief segment to talk about the presentation as well as the visual effects in the film. The soundtrack was phenomenal. I don't think this is a spoiler because they do it in every single Godzilla movie, but Godzilla's main suite, the main theme of Godzilla, is present in this movie at least twice. The first go-around, I'm pretty sure it's an original sampling, and the second go-around sounds like a remaster, and honestly, outside of just the Godzilla themes in this movie, the soundtrack is amazing. On the topic of soundtrack and sound design, I'm going to say something right now that is not technically a spoiler, but you will know exactly what I mean when you watch the movie, and you will know when I say that the silence was deafening in this movie. Normally, when you think of sound design, you are thinking of putting sounds into the environment to sell an illusion, to sell the scene, to sell the scenery, to make you believe that you are there. But it is this movie's use of the absence of sound that genuinely needs to be studied. Because the absence of sound, that negative space that it creates in some of the scenes in this movie, is spectacular. Now, on the flip side of the sound design, where the silence was made to emphasize certain portions, I'm gonna need a long sip for this one. The sound design in the movie, when Godzilla is on screen, when Godzilla is fighting anyone, it can only be experienced in a theater. Or if if you can't go to the movies to see Godzilla Minus One, get yourself a soundbar, get yourself a surround sound bass system, whatever you have to do to feel this movie when you watch it for the first time. Godzilla's roar in this is fairly indicative of most of the iterations of the character. I want to say that it leaned mostly on the Heisei iteration of the character's roar, but a little bit more low-pitched. It never really screeched or squeaked like it normally does. But when you hear Godzilla's roar and there is nothing else happening in the scene, the theater shook. Anytime that a gun was fired, or a bomb exploded, or a jet flew by, you felt every single bit of it. And that is when I cannot say enough that Godzilla Minus One is a theatrical experience. There were moments where I had to stop myself because I wanted to start clapping and just start going ballistic in my theater because of the immensely hype moments that happen purely from the sound design alone. But this was no Spider-Man No Way Home situation, and there was only like 10 other people in my theater, so I didn't want to be that guy. But again, this movie was my favorite theater experience this year. I've seen a couple of other movies in the theater this year. The first one that comes to mind is Barbie, and while I really enjoyed Barbie and I really enjoyed it as a theater experience, I could have gotten the same experience from watching Barbie at home as I would have gotten in the theater. But Godzilla Minus One, the grandiose, the scale, the immensity of the film benefits from having it in a theater as opposed to just watching it at home. If you can own it and watch it at home, please do. I know I am buying this on Blu-ray day one, but if you can help it, go watch this movie in theaters. Support this movie and let Toho know that we loved this movie, because if I'm looking everywhere else, man, I think everyone collectively is sharing my sentiment about Godzilla Minus One. And really quick, I gotta pump the brakes for a second because I don't want to get into final thoughts just yet. Presentation, going back to the presentation for a minute, I want to talk as well about the CGI in the movie. This could debatably be my one nitpick with the film. There is always going to be a part of me that wants Godzilla to stay in rubber suits and have miniature sets. Now, granted, I'm not a filmmaker, right? I don't know what that budget looks like, and I don't know what that production looks like when you are making a Godzilla movie almost all practical. I applauded Shin Godzilla for utilizing miniatures and for utilizing a semi-rubber suit for that creature design, but a good chunk of the movie was still CGI Godzilla. And with the legendary MonsterVerse Godzilla, I have embraced the idea of a Godzilla that is all CGI, that is perfectly fine. But my one partial nitpick is that I sort of miss the rubber suits. It's just the tokusatsu fan in me. You know, Ultraman, Power Rangers, Sentai, Kamen Rider. When you put something in front of the camera, that is something that is there, and I believe that something is there, no matter how ridiculous it looks. But here's the thing, though. Even with that gripe out of the way, even though I want it to be a rubber suit, the visual effects in this movie were fantastic. Godzilla animated pretty well in terms of, the polygon count of the model. The fidelity of Godzilla is very well done. He is animated fairly well, although some of his movements were a little jerky in some scenes. They didn't really flow as naturally as I would have wanted them to. That's the other gripe I sort of have, is that when you get a person in the suit, you will have slightly more natural movements and you will believe that that thing is moving, versus an animated creature that requires a lot more attention to detail to prevent it from going into the uncanny valley and for you to actually believe that there is a monster on screen. I have to emphasize, though, is that 97% of the time, Godzilla is on screen, and I loved every second of his screen time. Not getting into any spoilers when it comes to this, but all I have to say about the new Godzilla's presentation, atomic breath. That is all I'm going to say. You saw the trailer too. It's even better. It is even better after that. The impact that his atomic breath has in multiple scenes, you have to witness it. That's all I'm going to say. This is why I'm very fascinated and interested in doing reviews of this type, where I give it some time to marinate and I talk about a movie, not really fully awake just yet. Because I hope that the passion in my voice and the hype in my voice when I'm talking about this movie, even, you know, the morning after seeing the movie, now that the rose-tinted glasses are off, and now that I've had time to think about the movie, I hope that I have conveyed the message of just how much I loved this movie as an experience. Godzilla Minus One is proof that a Godzilla movie can have all of the makings of an Oscar-worthy film. You can have human characters that we care about. You can have depth to those human characters and their story. You can have those human characters have more than half of the movie's runtime in terms of screen time and not have the film be boring. You can have a Godzilla movie take itself seriously while also simultaneously leaning in a little bit to the absurd. And you can make a Godzilla feel large, imposing, and terrifying from sound design alone. If you feel the weight of a creature on screen, then you will believe the weight of that creature on screen. This feels kind of juxtaposed now that I'm thinking about it, talking about the Godzilla X Kong trailer out loud, because this thought and sentiment somewhat contradicts how I feel about Godzilla X Kong. I'm unfortunately not going to do a dedicated video to the trailer, given that I wanted to do a reaction to the trailer on top of my thoughts about the trailer. I already said I was done making videos for 2023, and here I am snaking one more out before the year's over. But I had to talk about this movie. I could not hold back my thoughts. But leaning over to Godzilla X Kong, I don't have nearly as many problems with Godzilla X Kong leaning into the absurd. Because the fantastic thing about this genre, the kaiju genre, the tokusatsu genre, is that you can tell the story from as many degrees of seriousness as you want. Godzilla Minus One is proof that a Godzilla movie, a kaiju movie, can be a serious, traumatic period piece. But a movie like Godzilla vs. Kong, for example, can be the most ridiculous movie where the human characters are nothing more than comedy filler, but you have almost 70% of the movie's runtime just being the monsters beating the piss out of each other, and it can still be an entertaining cinematic experience. Y'all, I have seen the arguments on Twitter. Y'all really need to get your cinematic heads out of your asses. Godzilla Minus One is peak cinema, and Godzilla X Kong has the capacity to be peak cinema, even if it is more absurd than Godzilla vs. Kong was. At the end of the day, no matter who makes it, Japan, America, whoever wants to make a Godzilla project, it is all Godzilla at the end of the day. And between Minus One, Godzilla X Kong, Monarch Legacy of Monsters, and Godzilla's cameo appearance in a video game I might be talking about real soon, between all of that, Godzilla fans, we are finally feasting with Godzilla content. We went almost, like, what, four to 5 years without a new movie? Toho hasn't touched the license. They've mostly been doing cameos and other stuff. Outside of Legendary, we haven't had a lot of Godzilla content. And now here we are. In 1 year alone, we're going to have a new TV show, a cameo in a video game, and we're going to have 2 movies. It is a fantastic time to be a Godzilla fan. And I am so excited to talk about this franchise more and more as we lead into the new year. Godzilla Minus One is peak cinema. So those were my unscripted ramblings about Godzilla Minus One. I truly hope you enjoyed this off-the-cuff rambling video, as I want to talk about movies a lot more. Stay tuned for 2024 when I'm going to talk about what other movies I'm going to be talking about. But if you love Godzilla half as much as I do, then please consider liking the video and subscribing to stick around for me talking about the Big G just a little bit more next year. But I promise this is my last video for 2023. I'm going on vacation. Christmas is around the corner. Please spend time with your family and friends and enjoy the holiday. But I will see you all in 2024 to figure out just what the hell this was all about. And as always, do not forget to stay loved, keep loving, and have a wonderful night.